So you guys, after Bridgerton season 1, I was so excited for the idea and possibility of a season 2, and now that it's finally here, did I love it? Well, what's going on, everyone? James here with another real review, and yes, I'm finally back home. I know I was traveling a little bit, but we're back with another review for Bridgerton season 2. I'm so excited. It's finally streaming on Netflix, and guys, like I mentioned, I was a fan of season 1, so I was really curious to see where they were going to go with season 2. It's 8 episodes again this season. It's created by Shonda, Rhimes, and stars Jonathan Bailey as Anthony, Simone Ashley as Kate, and Adjoa Andoh as Lady Danbury. Now, season 2 is based on the book The Viscount Who Loved Me, and it really surrounds Anthony Bridgerton. And Daphne's kind of out of the picture now. She and the Duke are doing their own thing, but this is now all about Anthony and his quest to marry, essentially. Now, did I love it? Did I hate it? I will definitely answer that question as we get into this review, but before we do get started, if it is your first time here at the channel, welcome to Real James, where I love talking about TV and movie like this all the time, so you're not going to want to miss out. Go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, and tap on that bell, y'all, and go ahead and hit the thumbs up button if you are a fan of Bridgerton, and get loud down below. I know this is mainly a spoiler-free review, so if you want to talk some spoilers, let's get loud and talk about this season, because there are some crazy moments, and then there are some moments that make me scratch my head. But you know what, guys, let's go ahead and get started on a positive note with the positives for season 2, and at the top of the list really is Jonathan Bailey. He gives an incredibly strong performance here. What he adds to the character of Anthony actually gave it more depth and layers, and it added to this season. If not for Jonathan Bailey, I think this season would have been a wash, but Jonathan Bailey gives a compelling performance. I really love what the writers did by touching on the impact of his father's death, because it does add another layer to this character. And it also explains some of his motivations for his family and his familial duties. But then you also have the conflict between Anthony, Edwina, and Kate that is pretty much the focal point for this season, even though, and we'll talk about it later on, this season has a lot of different focal points, but this is probably going to be the main draw for many people. And Jonathan Bailey really does make this part of the story that much more believable because of his acting. And yes, y'all, if you are thirsting after Jonathan Bailey, there's enough content for you here too. And the next thing that worked for me as well were some of the new faces that were introduced here in season 2, like Kate and Edwina. Edwina is played by Charithna Chandran, who does a really good job at kind of portraying a character, a young woman who is looking for her love match. She's also naive, but at the same time, she knows what she wants. So there's this internal conflict that the character has to play with, and I thought that she did a really good job at kind of fleshing out the character. Even though the script doesn't really give her too much to work with sometimes, she makes the best of her screen time. And I also love that her range as an actor was put on full display during episode 6, and she's also a bit ruthless, so don't cross Edwina. And then there's Kate, who's played by Simone Ashley, and this is someone I was actually interested to see and how they would actually take the role of this character and make it their own, and I'm happy to say that Simone Ashley does a really good job here. She's a strong-willed woman who is smitten by Anthony, and well, let's just say Anthony might be smitten by her too. So as you can tell, there's a lot here that can provide for some drama, some tea, and Lady Whistledown writing a ton of different articles and pamphlets, but I will tell you that Simone Ashley, even though she's not always given these solo moments, whenever she does get them, I was convinced. And then there's also times where she sort of upstages other actors that she's alongside, because she really just does take control of your attention. So I really loved her performance here as well. And her back and forth between Jonathan Bailey was actually kind of fun to witness, even though I will tell you, I think Simone Ashley wins a lot of those arguments. And then there's another layer that season 2 has, and that is the topic of women and women's rights and women empowerment. And I kind of wish that they kind of spearheaded that a little bit more in this season. It's largely a subplot, but I do like that sometimes it's not as subtle. The subtext in a lot of conversations, especially with Eloise, it just helps add a little bit more character to season 2. And speaking of Eloise, she's actually the one that spearheads this theme in season 2 from the beginning. You can just tell this character, Eloise, is not going to sit back and just watch things unfold. She's taking control. And for as much as I thought Claudia Jessie did an okay job in season 1, she arguably gives my favorite performance in season 2, even if the script and also the direction doesn't necessarily cater to her. Yeah, there are some elements here, and I know this is the positive section, but there are some elements like Eloise's character that I thought that they could have made more of a center focus for this season, but instead they kind of push her off to the side one too many times. But guys, I know everyone's wondering what the heck is up with Lady Whistledown, and you know what? This plot is actually pretty engaging. Now, it's engaging for the most part because when they do focus on what I liked in the first half of the season, which was Penelope, aka Lady Whistledown as we all know, kind of trying to hide her mysterious identity because her best friend Eloise is pretty much on her tail. Like, she's trying to figure out who Lady Whistledown is throughout the season. I thought that was pretty interesting, and it felt like a cool game of cat and mouse without either of them really knowing that, well, the other knows the truth. And from there, this season actually branches off to the Queen desperately trying to figure out who this mysterious author is. Now, Golda Rosheuvel also gives a really darn good performance again as the Queen, and man, it is just, it all works for me when it comes to the Queen, but I do think that they stray from her more than they did in season 1. And of course, if you're already a fan of Bridgerton, you know you gotta come here for the costumes. And let me tell you guys, the costuming and makeup department here is still solid. Man, all the outfits looked really good. You can tell the set design actually might have been a little bit better than season 1, but I really enjoyed the costuming for all of our characters in this season. But y'all, that is about all I have for the positives because it's time to dive into the negatives. And to be honest with you, I do think season 2 is, as a whole, less engaging than season 1, and a lot of that has to do with the writing. I felt the scripts here for season 2 were just so lackluster, especially in comparison to season 1 where there was so much more of a focused approach, and here there's just too much that they're throwing up on the wall. And I don't even mind the slow burn in the beginning of season 2. I appreciate a slow burn, especially in movies, but the payoff has to be good, and I just wasn't convinced that it was worth the wait. Outside of the thrills I felt with the Lady Whistledown plot, I wasn't entirely compelled by everything else this season was throwing at us. Even Kate and Anthony's story felt a little forced, and nothing about that felt as natural as it should have been. This season is really trying to play up the drama around every corner aspect where you just don't know what's happening next, but I actually was able to predict a lot of what was coming up, and that's not usual because if you know me guys, I'm not good at predicting things. I just really felt that a lot of the dramatic elements here were strained, and there were a lot of storylines that even carried over from the first season that just don't work for me at all. And I'm looking right at you, Featherington family. I'm sorry, the whole Lady Featherington, Cousin Jack, Prudence angle was just pretty boring. And I hate to say that, but that is the only word I feel like I can use to describe their subplot. It's just not engaging, it's not interesting. And they really do try to throw a lot of curveballs with the Featherington family and some of these other subplots during the home stretch for this season, but every time they go to the Featherington family, it brings this season to a halt. And unfortunately, they don't really capitalize on a lot of these other story threads. I just think they try to fit too much into one season, and what that does is it takes away from a very focused approach. Honestly, Kate and Anthony and Edwina, that triangle, that should have been the crux of this season. That should have been something to help this season, but unfortunately, they actually go away from that one too many times. And if you're like me, you're probably wondering, well, when do we really get into the thick of things? And this 8-episode season takes a little too long, honestly, to get into another gear. Now, I know what you're thinking. This man just said he likes slow burns, and I do. But the problem is, when we get into that next gear, we're already halfway through this season, and for me that actually takes a little too long. We need to get something, even just like massive breadcrumbs, that help us feel it's like something might happen, maybe something is on the horizon, but I didn't really feel like that. When I got to episode 4, I kind of snapped out of it, and I'm like, oh, that's right. Oh, this is supposed to be dramatic. So the pacing is a little bit rocky, and even though things get more interesting by the midway point of this season, there was still a lot left to be desired. And if we can, let's circle back to Kate and Anthony, because I really felt like this could have been what saved this season for me, but the dynamic duo here, in comparison even to season 1, was not really that great. Their chemistry wasn't very strong and it wasn't working for me, and I don't think it's because of their performances. Like I said, Simone actually has some incredible moments here, especially in episode 5, but then when you put them together, I feel like maybe they were doing that in this season kind of late in the game, and when they did, it felt very forced. I just wish that this season did a better job at building up their romance properly, but unfortunately, I just don't necessarily think they did that. And I'm not going to be that guy that tries to compare everything to season 1, but I do think it's an interesting comparison and contrast here between season 1 and 2, because the dynamic duo from season 1, Daphne and the Duke, that worked for me. And even though Daphne shows up for about half of this season, it is just so awkward to hear her reference the Duke without him even being present in the room. Honestly, Regé-Jean Page's acting was sorely missed here. He, for me, is a much better lead, and I think that he actually brought much more than what people realize to season 1. And because our lead duo wasn't as strong to me, the back end of this season, that final stretch, it just did not keep me captivated. I'll be honest, I unfortunately was checked out by the season finale, and that is not a good sign. And a lot of that lack of immersion for me, it does come down to the filmmaking and editing, because it was a lot rougher than I thought it was gonna be. I expected something really solid like season 1, and even the cinematography was really bland here because the scenery is beautiful, the flowers are vibrant, but the way they shot this season, it was lacking. There were many quick cuts that were just really awkward, a lot of shaky camera during an intense conversation, and it just doesn't really add to the season in a positive way. Even during the romantic scenes, and y'all know what I'm talking about, during those scenes, it was actually shot pretty poorly. Like, it doesn't really make me feel anything for these scenes. And honestly, if I'm gonna be completely truthful here, those scenes sort of came and they went, and that isn't normal, especially considering season 1. So overall, you guys, I'm sure you're asking, did you like this more than season 1? And if you skipped ahead to the video, let me answer it this way. No. Absolutely not. And unfortunately, season 2 is missing a lot of what season 1 had that made it great. But even when you sort of just judge them individually, season 2 for me is just not very good. Even though there are some amazing and strong performances by Jonathan Bailey and Simone Ashley, I just really don't think that this season had enough in the tank for it to really sustain through 8 episodes. And that's weird to say out loud because 8 episodes is not a lot of TV, but this season I should say, was just dragging along to the finish line. I ended up feeling like a lot of the storylines were not as interesting, and I can't lie to y'all, there were some things that they focused on that really made me scratch my head. And again, I'll go back to it. The Featherington family subplot. They just focused way too much on that, especially at the end, where I thought, do we need all of this? We don't. See, the thing is, it was kind of relying on some of these threads as a crutch, and it takes away from the focal point, which should be Anthony and Kate. So after a while, I almost feel like maybe these were 2 different seasons squished into one. The first half, it worked for me. The second half of the season, it didn't. And of course, I don't want to be negative. This isn't the worst season of television I've ever seen. There are some really good and funny moments here, but I can't tell you that this actually makes me excited for a season 3. So if I even had to rate this out of 5, I probably would give it like a 3. It's only a 3 because there are some moments here that did get a reaction out of me and that I was hooked on. So that's why it is a 3. It was a 2.5 though before everything else. I mean, I had to come back and kind of consider and think about, okay, is this a 2.5? It's definitely not. So there you have it, guys. That's my real review of Bridgerton season 2. Unfortunately, it is not as much of a hit as I wanted it to be, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. So go ahead and get loud down below and tell me, do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Are you kind of in the middle for this season? And if you haven't already, hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel for more reviews and reactions just like this, and hit that thumbs up button if you are a big fan of Bridgerton, especially Bridgerton season 2. If you loved it, that's okay, but for me, I have a funny feeling Lady Whistledown's gonna write something really bad about me in the paper. Oh boy. Alrighty, y'all. Again, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you at the next screening.